There are moments in history when an entire civilization is tested in a single night. For Earth, that night began when the stars vanished. No one understood what was happening. Not the people in the cities, not the soldiers in orbit, not the children looking up at the sky. But far beyond our world, the Galaxy Council already knew. They had seen this horror before. They had watched worlds burn before. And this time, they decided Earth was not worth saving. So while humanity stood alone against an enemy born from extinction itself, the rest of the galaxy remained silent. They expected fear. They expected collapse. They expected Earth to die quietly. Instead, they witnessed the birth of the most dangerous force in the universe. A species with nothing left to lose, and everything left to protect. They did not warn us. That was the part history never forgave. An entire galaxy knew something terrible was moving through the dark, and while Earth laughed, argued, traded, streamed, loved, and slept, the Galaxy Council watched in silence. No message, no beacon, no mercy. And when the sky finally opened above Earth, it was already too late. The first signal came from the outer colonies near Jupiter. A mining station went dark in less than 12 seconds. No distress call, no explosion, just silence. Then a cargo convoy vanished between Mars and Luna. 7 ships, 2,000 crew, gone so completely that even their engine trails disappeared from military scans. At first, Earth Command called it a systems failure, then sabotage, then piracy. But deep inside the Council Citadel, in a chamber older than most suns, 31 alien delegates stared at the star map of Sol and said nothing. They had seen this pattern before. A young species rises too fast, expands too boldly, builds weapons too quickly, dreams too loudly. Then the hunters come. On Earth, nobody knew that phrase. Not yet. Humanity was still new to the galactic stage. Only 23 years had passed since first contact. 23 years since a human diplomat stood shaking under the weight of alien eyes and introduced Earth as a peaceful world seeking friendship. Back then, the Council had smiled the way old empires smile at children. Polite, patient, distant. Humans were tolerated, not respected. Too emotional, they said. Too unstable. Too primitive, too dangerous to trust, yet too amusing to ignore. So they let us join the lesser trade networks. Let us attend secondary council sessions. Let us buy star maps with entire sectors blacked out. Let us think we were part of something grand. But they never told us the truth, that the galaxy was not united. It was terrified. Captain Elena Voss was the first human to realize something was wrong. She commanded the UNS Horizon, a patrol cruiser assigned to deep orbital security beyond Neptune. Elena was not famous. Not yet. She was the kind of officer the public rarely noticed. Sharp eyes. Few words. A woman who trusted censored ghosts more than politicians. When long-range arrays picked up a mass distortion near the Kuiper Belt, her crew assumed it was debris. Elena did not. Run it again, she said. The tactical officer frowned. There's nothing there, Captain. Elena kept staring at the display. Exactly. The shape on the board was wrong. Empty space does not bend like that. Vacuum does not ripple against background radiation. But something out there was swallowing light itself. Not moving through space, hiding inside it. Then the stars behind it blinked out. One by one, like someone dragging a blade across heaven. Contact Earth Command, Elena ordered. Before the comms officer could answer, every screen aboard the Horizon flashed white. A tone hit the ship. Not a sound. Something deeper. A vibration that crawled through metal, bone, and thought. Crew members dropped to their knees. Blood ran from noses. Lights shattered overhead. The ship lurched as if struck by an invisible fist. Then the signal arrived. No language. No code. Just an image. A dead world. Burning oceans. Black towers rising from the corpses of cities. And above them, a shape so huge it covered the sky. The transmission ended with coordinates. Earth. For 16 seconds, nobody on the bridge moved. Then Elena whispered the words that would later be carved into the memorial walls of New Geneva. They know where we live. On Earth, panic did not come immediately. Humanity had become arrogant in its own way. We had survived climate collapse, resource wars, orbital riots, and the slow, brutal chaos of becoming an interplanetary species. We believed every threat had a solution. Every enemy could be negotiated with, hacked, bombed, or bought. The world governments held emergency meetings. Fleets were scrambled. Defenses activated. Civilian traffic grounded. Broadcasters spoke of caution, uncertainty, preparedness. But underground, in the restricted archives beneath the Council Citadel, an old alien scholar opened a sealed file last touched 8 centuries earlier. Threat designation, Vorakai swarm. Outcome of prior encounters, extinction. Council protocol, observe. Do not engage. Preserve core worlds. The logic was simple, cruel. If the swarm had chosen Earth, then Earth was already dead. And sacrificing fleets for a doomed species would only draw the monsters toward richer worlds. So the Council remained silent. They watched human channels fill with fear. Watched evacuation plans fail under impossible numbers. Watched Earth's leaders promise strength they did not truly possess. And somewhere beyond Pluto, Captain Elena Voss turned the horizon toward the coming dark. Not to win, not even to survive, but to buy Earth one more hour. Because that was the thing the galaxy never understood about humans. We do not need hope to fight. Sometimes we fight because there is nothing left but hope for someone else. And as the first hidden warships of the Vorakai emerged from folded space like wounds tearing open in reality, one frightened young officer on the horizon asked the question the whole planet would soon ask. Captain, where are the Council fleets? Elena looked at the void, at the enemy, at the silent stars. Then she answered, they're watching. And in that moment, humanity learned the oldest lesson in the universe. No one was coming to save us. The first attack should have been impossible. Earth had defenses, not enough for a true galactic war, but enough to stop pirates, rogue states, and most known raiders. Orbital rail platforms ringed the planet. Lunar batteries tracked every ship entering intersystem lanes. Mars hosted kinetic launch grids powerful enough to crack armored cruisers in half. But the Vorakai did not attack like a fleet. They arrived like a disease. 1 second, the sky above Saturn's rings was empty. The next, 17 black shapes were inside engagement range. No warp flare, no gate signature, no jump wake. They did not cross space. They slipped through it, as if distance itself had failed to notice them. The first station to fire was Helios, Array 9. Its captain launched a full spread of antimatter lances. On every military simulation known to humanity, that barrage should have vaporized anything smaller than a moon. Instead, the lances hit a dark veil around the enemy vessel and vanished. Not deflected, not absorbed, erased. Then the station's own reactor turned inward. That was the only way survivors later described it. A sun collapsing into its own scream. Helios Array 9 folded into a sphere of molten steel and dead light. 12,000 people were gone before the shockwave reached Saturn's rings. The footage hit Earth 6 minutes later. And that was when panic truly began. Cities dimmed as power grids rerouted to defense systems. Emergency sirens rolled across continents. Trains stopped. Space elevators locked down. Families flooded bunkers, subways, shelters. Any place that felt like depth in concrete could somehow protect them from stars. Children cried. Markets crashed. Religions called it judgment. Governments called it a hostile incursion. Soldiers called it what it was, an invasion. Yet even then, the mystery was worse than the fear. Because the Vorakai did not communicate. They did not demand surrender. They did not issue threats. They simply moved closer, killing anything in their path with a precision so cold it felt mechanical, but not machine-like. Their vessels were organic and angular at the same time, like skeletons carved from black glass. No windows, no insignia, no heat signatures matching conventional life support. Every scan returned contradictions. Mass readings changed by the second. Hull geometry shifted when not directly observed. Target locks decayed for no reason. It was as if reality refused to describe them accurately. Captain Elena Voss saw it firsthand when the Horizon ambushed a scouting group near Uranus. She knew her ship could not win a direct exchange, so she did what humans had always done when facing something bigger. She cheated. The Horizon powered cold, drifted through a debris field, and used old mining charges to mimic reactor signatures. The Vorakai vessels took the bait. For 8 precious seconds, they exposed their understructure while investigating the false targets. Elena fired every torpedo at once. The explosions lit the darkness blue-white. One enemy ship split open. Humanity celebrated too soon, because from the wreck came something far worse. Not debris, not escape pods. Shapes, hundreds of them. Slim, jointed fast. Boarding organisms or soldiers, nobody knew. They crossed open vacuum without visible propulsion and slammed into the Horizon's hull like thrown knives. Within moments, alarm screamed through every deck. Breach on levels 4 through 8. Internal movement detected. Life signs dropping. The security feed lasted 11 seconds before static consumed it. But that was enough. Enough to show black-limbed creatures unfolding inside corridors. Enough to show armored Marines firing pulse rifles point-blank and still being overwhelmed. Enough to show a crewman dragged upward onto the ceiling by claws that ignored gravity. The Horizon became a war inside a coffin. Elena sealed sections, flooded compartments, venting parts of her own ship in a vacuum just to slow the intruders. Crew members fought in hallways, in med bays, in maintenance shafts barely wide enough to turn around. Everywhere the same reports came in. They don't stop. They don't retreat. They don't even react to pain. The survivors started calling them shades, because they moved like living absences, and because once they entered a room, people vanished. Back on Earth, analysts searched every piece of Council data ever shared with humanity. Most of it was useless diplomacy, censored maps, and ancient trade doctrine. But buried inside a rejected cultural exchange archive, an intern in Nairobi found a fragment of testimony from a long-dead alien frontier commander. One line changed everything. Do not mistake the first wave for the enemy. The first wave is only what they use to measure your worth. That line reached President Amara Vale in the underground command complex beneath Geneva. She read it twice, then asked the question no advisor wanted to answer. If this is only a test, what comes after? No one replied, because above them, over every city on Earth, the night sky had started to change. At first it looked like weather. High altitude darkening, strange auroras, patterns moving against the stars. Then telescopes confirmed the truth. Something vast was entering the outer edge of the solar plane. Not a fleet, a structure. No, a body. Containment over heroics. Survival over sentiment. Earth was regrettable, but expendable. Terav looked at the humans on the live feed. Fire crews pulling children into shelters. Pilots launching with no chance of returning. Doctors staying above ground when they could have run. A civilian freighter captain turning her unarmed ship into a decoy to divert pursuit away from a refugee convoy. Expendable? No. Abandoned. On the horizon, Elena limped through smoke-filled corridors after hours of fighting. Half her ship was dead. The engine core was failing. Her first officer was missing. Yet when comms finally cut through the jamming, Earth Command gave her a choice. Return to inner orbit. Fall back for planetary defense. She stared at the tactical projection, at the giant thing approaching, at the enemy scouts still shadowing the dark. And suddenly she understood the mystery. The Vorakai were not attacking Earth because of our weakness. They were attacking because of our potential. Somewhere, somehow, they had judged humanity worth erasing before we became something dangerous. Elena opened a system-wide channel to every remaining ship in Seoul. Her voice was tired, steady, and unforgettable. This isn't random. They know what we can become, and they're afraid we'll live long enough to prove it. For the first time since first contact, the people of Earth stopped asking who would save them, and started asking a very different question. What would it cost to make the galaxy regret leaving us alone? The answer came quickly. It would cost everything. The first full battle for Earth began over Luna. Humanity chose the moon not because it was easy to defend, but because losing it would mean losing the inner shield network, the mass driver chains, and the final line before the homeworld itself. Lunar orbit became a wall of steel, plasma, prayer, and desperation. There were no speeches before the battle, no grand declarations, only launch orders. Pilots climbed into fighters with shaking hands. Marines locked mag boots and checked ammunition like ritual. Civilians working shipyards refused evacuation, so the last half-finished destroyers could still leave dock. Across Earth, billions watched live maps update with red markers that kept multiplying. The sky above Luna filled with war. The Vorakai came in layered formations that made no tactical sense to human doctrine. Light ships in front, heavy masses behind, organic swarms between them. They did not protect one another the way normal fleets did. They moved like one mind, thinking through many bodies. Sacrifices were immediate, efficient, emotionless. Human commanders adapted in real time. Admiral Jonas Rhee, head of Earth Orbital Defense, understood within minutes that conventional formation fighting would fail. So he scattered the fleet into independent hunter groups and gave a single order now studied in every military academy from Earth to Titan. Break doctrine. Keep moving. Make them solve us one human at a time. It was chaos. Beautiful chaos. And it worked, at least at first. Human ships fought dirty. Missile boats hid inside debris clouds. Pilots flew directly through the thermal exhaust of larger carriers to scramble enemy tracking. Lunar artillery baited enemy masses into overlapping kill zones, then rotated shield frequencies by hand when software failed. Mining tugs rammed crippled Vorakai vessels rather than abandon position. In one recorded transmission, a civilian engineer named Mateo Cruz can be heard laughing while manually overloading a station weapon far beyond safety limits. His final words were simple. If it blows, aim the blast at something ugly. It did. The shot tore through 3 enemy hulls and lit the lunar horizon like a second sunrise. For a brief moment, humanity believed maybe courage would be enough. Then the real war began. The giant structure approaching from deep space finally entered clear visual range. Every telescope, drone, and defense array locked onto it. Analysts had dozens of names within minutes. Leviathan, Womb Ship, World Eater, Night Cathedral. None captured the truth. It was not just a command vessel. It was a factory, a moving extinction engine. Openings in its armored surface peeled back like wounds. Thousands of smaller organisms poured from within. Not fighters, not troop carriers, seed forms, living weapons designed to descend through atmosphere and consume cities from the inside out. Earth had misjudged the invasion. Luna was never the objective. It was the doorbell. President Amara Vale addressed the planet from the Geneva bunker as fresh casualty numbers poured in behind cameras. Advisors wanted a polished message. Calm, controlled, strategic. Instead, she told the truth. We are under attack by an enemy that expected us to break quickly. So far, we have disappointed them. Then she leaned closer to the lens. If you're listening from a shelter, from a ship, from a battlefield, or from a hospital bed, hear me clearly. We may not survive this as we were, but we will make sure the story of humanity is not one of surrender. That message spread faster than panic. Factories on Earth converted overnight. Consumer lines became ammunition lines. University labs unlocked restricted prototypes. Retired veterans volunteered by the millions. Teenagers lied about their age to enlist. Farmers donated fuel reserves. Programmers joined cyberwar cells. Astronomers became targeting officers. Nobody waited for perfect instructions anymore. Humanity entered total resistance. And that was the moment the Council began to feel uneasy, because abandoned species were supposed to collapse. That was the pattern. Fear, fragmentation, bargaining, collapse. Humans skipped the bargaining. Counselor Terov brought the evidence to the chamber floor. They're not behaving like prior targets, he said. A reptilian elder turned one cold eye toward him. That will not change the outcome. Terav did not look away. Perhaps not. But outcomes are shaped by cost. Humanity is increasing the cost. The elders dismissed him. Again, on the battlefield, cost became personal. Her first officer, Lieutenant Soren Malik, had survived after all. Broken arm, burned face, no sleep for 30 hours. He stood beside Elena and asked the question every honest soldier eventually asks. Do you think we can stop them? Elena watched tactical icons die across the board. No, she said. Soren exhaled once. Then Elena added, but stopping them isn't the only way to win. He turned to her. She pointed at the Leviathan's projected path. They came expecting prey. We need to teach them what it means to hunt something that bites back. That idea spread. Not officially, not from command, but from ship to ship, bunker to bunker, trench to trench. If humanity could not outgun the Vorakai, maybe we could wound them so deeply that the galaxy would never forget what happened here. So new tactics emerged. Suicide intercept patterns, signal traps, heat lure swarms, false retreats into prepared kill fields. Even art became weaponized. Hacked public networks broadcast shifting visual noise patterns that seemed to interfere with shade coordination during close-quarters combat. Nobody knew why. Nobody had time to study it. They just kept doing whatever worked. Then came the Black Rain. The first atmospheric spores reached Earth over the Pacific. Tiny pods falling like ash, invisible to most radar, each capable of burrowing through metal and flesh alike. Entire coastal defense platforms went silent within minutes. Cities dimmed. Fire spread. Emergency services collapsed in impact zones. Humanity was now fighting in orbit, on the moon, in the skies, and inside its own streets. And still no council fleet appeared. Only silence. Only observation. Only the cold mathematics of alien survival. But beneath the ruins of an old radio observatory in Chile, a team of scientists monitoring exotic signatures made a discovery that changed everything. One of the destroyed Vorakai scout vessels had not fully died. Deep in its fractured biological core, a repeating pattern remained active. Not a distress call, not a command signal, a map, a memory, something stored within the enemy itself. When the data was decrypted, the room went quiet. Because hidden inside the monstrous architecture of the Vorakai network was a truth more terrifying than the invasion. They were not a species expanding. They were running. And whatever they were running from was even worse. The room beneath the observatory felt colder after that. Not physically. Something else. The kind of cold that settles into people when reality becomes larger than fear. Dr. Imani Rao stood over the recovered data lattice from the dead Vorakai scout and replayed the final sequence for the third time. Around her, military analysts, cryptographers, and exhausted intelligence officers watched in silence. The images were fragmented, half biological, half digital, translated through machine guesswork and human instinct. Worlds burning, not by Vorakai hands. Vorakai ships shattered in impossible numbers. Stars dimming behind structures so massive they resembled floating graveyards. And at the center of every corrupted memory, a symbol. Circular, split by 3 descending lines. Unknown, ancient, pursuing. The Vorakai were not conquering Earth for territory. They were preparing. Harvesting mass, energy, biomatter, position. Using soul as a fortress line against something behind them. The enemy humanity had called unstoppable, was terrified. When President Vale received the report, she did not ask whether it was true. She asked what mattered more. Will the council know this symbol? The answer came from Counselor Terav himself. For the first time, the silence broke. He sent a hidden transmission to Earth using private diplomatic relays, an act that would later be called treason by the council and salvation by everyone else. The message arrived in Geneva under layered encryption. Only 6 people heard it live. Terav's pale face flickered onto the screen, heavy with shame. Yes, he said, we know it. He told them the story the council had buried. Long before humanity learned to shape fire, the galaxy had nearly died. An ancient machine civilization known only in surviving fragments, as the Eternum Drift had awakened beyond map space. Nobody knew who built them. Nobody knew what they wanted. The only certainty was their pattern. Systems went dark, data vanished, biospheres collapsed, and anything technologically advanced enough to resist was disassembled and turned into more of them. The Council had not defeated the Drift. It had survived by retreating and feeding sacrificial borders to whatever came next. The Vorakai had once been one of those borders. A monstrous species, yes. Ruthless, devouring. But even they had been broken by the machine tide. What remained of them now moved ahead of the Drift like wolves fleeing wildfire, consuming anything useful, fortifying every route, preparing for one last stand. Earth was not chosen at random. Sol occupied a rare gravitational corridor, a natural choke point, the perfect place to anchor a defensive empire of corpses. For several long seconds after Terra finished, no one in the bunker spoke. Then Admiral Ree said the obvious. So the galaxy left us ignorant because panic would spread. Terra lowered his head. No, because if young worlds knew the truth, they might demand a united war. And the Council no longer believes unity can win. That sentence did something strange inside every human who heard it. It did not crush morale. It enraged it, because the Council had not merely abandoned Earth. It had abandoned the idea of fighting for anything larger than itself. Meanwhile, in orbit, the war reached its breaking point. Luna's outer defenses failed in 3 sectors. Mars lost contact with 2 shipyards. Refugee streams bottlenecked around Earth like rivers choking with wreckage. The Leviathan moved steadily inward, birthing more spores, more shades, more black ships. And then it spoke, not in language, in pressure. Every human on Earth felt it differently. A migraine, a nightmare while awake, a pulse behind the eyes. Machines glitched, animals screamed, windows shattered in cities thousands of kilometers apart. The message was not translated, but the meaning arrived all the same. Yield biomass, preserve structures, resist and be rendered. For one horrifying moment, the planet felt small. Then human networks exploded with laughter, curses, music, memes, battle hymns, hacked remixes, and one now legendary reply from an anonymous Marine broadcasting from the lunar trenches. Rendered? Come down here and try. That was humanity in one sentence. The Council watched that too. And slowly, very slowly, some of them began to understand the species they had dismissed. Humans were afraid. Of course we were. But human fear does not always produce surrender. Sometimes it produces invention. In the hours after Terra's revelation, Dr. Amani Rao and her team made a second discovery hidden inside Vorakai biology. Their ships were not shielded in the traditional sense. They existed inside a phase state maintained by synchronized living nodes. Destroy one node, and the field compensated. Strike many at once with enough temporal irregularity, and the system stumbled. It could not erase attacks, it could not predict. Humanity had exactly one class of weapon chaotic enough to exploit that flaw. Old fusion pulse mines. Obsolete, unstable, ridiculed in Council weapons reviews for being too erratic to standardize. Human engineers had kept them anyway because they were cheap, ugly, and hard to counter. For the first time, that unpredictability became an advantage. Admiral reordered every stockpile in the inner system redirected. Captain Elena Voss volunteered for the strike. The target was not the Leviathan's hull. Too strong, too vast. Instead, they aimed for the berthing apertures opening along its ventral spine. If enough mines detonated in a randomized wave while the port cycled, the field might collapse locally, long enough to tear something vital. It was close to suicide, which meant the volunteer list overflowed within minutes. The strike force assembled from wrecked cruisers, cargo haulers, converted tugs, and fighters held together by desperation. No 2 ships matched. Their formation looked less like a navy than a scrapyard flung toward death. Humanity called it the Ragged Spear. Council surveillance officers mocked it at first. Then they watched it move. Inside, translucent command cysts embedded in the Leviathan's flesh floated the Vorakai themselves. Not monsters in the simple sense. Broken things. Tall once, maybe. Noble once, perhaps. Now fused into armor, neural roots, and survival machinery. Their bodies had become extensions of war. Their eyes were gone. Their minds networked in a hunger and panic. The invaders were not evil because they loved destruction. They were evil because they had chosen survival without morality. There's a difference, and humanity, burning across its own home system, understood it instantly. At 5,000 kilometers, Elena opened a channel to every human frequency in one unsecured council band. Her voice cut through the chaos. You all wanted to know where the line is. Outside the horizon, the ragged spear ignited its mine racks. Behind them, Earth burned blue and white. Ahead, the Leviathan opened its maw. Elena's next words were not a threat. They were a promise. Here, and then humanity rammed the apocalypse. The explosion did not look like victory. It looked like madness. Thousands of fusion pulse mines burst in unsynchronized waves across the Leviathan's underside, each detonation arriving a fraction too early or too late for the Vorakai phase field to smooth away. The effect spread like fractures racing through dark ice. Sections of the living shield flickered, reformed, flickered again. Then the horizon fired its spinal railgun straight into the largest opening. Every other ship in the ragged spear followed. For one impossible second, the Leviathan was vulnerable, and humans, more than anything else in this galaxy, understand what to do with one impossible second. Rail slugs, plasma spears, drilled uranium cores for mining rigs, improvised antimatter capsules held together by civilian engineers who knew they would never be thanked in person. Everything hit at once, not with elegance, but with fury. The Leviathan ruptured. A wound the size of a city split open along its ventral spine. Fire and fluid and black fragments blasted into space. Entire brooding chambers detonated. Swarms died unborn. Internal support webs snapped. The giant ship rolled, slowly at first, then violently, slamming through its own escort formations. The battlefield froze. Even the Vorakai seemed unable to process what had happened. The council certainly could not. Inside the Citadel chamber, delegates rose from their seats in disbelief as feed from Sol showed the impossible. A supposedly doomed primitive species had just crippled a world killer using salvage doctrine, obsolete weapons, and pure adaptive audacity. Counselor Tarov did not smile. He simply said, very softly, I warned you about the cost. But the HFY moment was not the explosion. Not truly. The real moment came after. Because crippling the Leviathan did not end the war. It enraged it. Secondary Vorakai fleets surged inward in a frenzy. Shade swarms multiplied. Atmospheric spores descended in black sheets over Asia, Europe, the Americas, Africa, everywhere at once. The wounded Leviathan began crashing toward Earth's orbital plane, its death spiral threatening to become a planet-killer impact if left unchecked. Any other species might have collapsed under the scale of that disaster. Humanity split the problem. That was the miracle. Earth did not wait for one savior. It became billions of them. Fighters and defense stations engaged the incoming fleets. Ground batteries targeted the spore rain. Civilian construction swarms launched to alter the Leviathan's trajectory with mass tug anchors. Lunar survivors reopened broken guns by hand. Mars redirected its colony mirrors to blind enemy sensors. Hackers on Earth cracked council relay channels and broadcast the battle to the entire galaxy in real time. No censorship, no diplomatic filters, no silence. Every species saw it now. Children in alien core worlds watched humans standing on burning rooftops firing skyward at descending horrors. Merchants on neutral stations watched medics dragging strangers into shelters while explosions shook the horizon. Council citizens watched farmers, miners, teachers, and mechanics turn themselves into resistance cells within hours. They saw Captain Elena Voss stay on the bridge of the horizon after the life support failed, giving navigation corrections between coughing fits, because if the Leviathan hit the wrong arc, millions more would die below. They saw President Vale refuse evacuation from Geneva when command staff urged retreat. They saw Marine units on Luna retake trench lines 3 times in one night while singing through cracked helmet mics. And for the first time in centuries, the galaxy saw something the Council had forgotten how to be: defiant. One broadcast changed everything. It came from a school shelter in Lagos, where local defenses had failed and volunteers were preparing for ground breach. A little girl, maybe 9 years old, looked into a rescue drone camera while adults behind her loaded rifles and improvised flammers. She was terrified. Everyone could see it. But when the operator asked if she had a message for whoever might be watching, she said, "We know you left us. We're fighting anyway." That clip reached the Council chamber. Then the border worlds. Then the old military archives of species who had once resisted and lost. It hit something dormant across the galaxy. Shame. Then courage. The first to move were not the great powers. Of course not. It was the smaller worlds. The ones the Council had always expected to obey. Fringes. Protectorates. Merchant coalitions. Veteran fleets long reduced to patrol duty. Captains with old grudges and species with old memories. One by one, ships changed course for Sol. Not enough to save Earth outright. Not yet, but enough to prove the silence was breaking. Back near Earth, Elena's crew completed the final tug solution. The Leviathan would miss the planet, barely. But the horizon had no engines left, no atmosphere in half its sections, and no escape vector from the tumbling debris storm around the dying giant. Soren Malik looked at Elena through the red emergency glow. "We did it," he said, almost disbelieving. Elena watched the planet turning below them. Blue oceans, white cloud bands, the fragile home they had held with blood and scrap. "Not yet," she said. A last cluster of Vorakai carriers was diving hard for Earth's atmosphere, shielded behind the wreckage cloud. No fleet remained in position to stop them. No fleet, except the horizon. The decision took 3 seconds. Elena ordered collision intercept. There was no argument, none worth remembering. Her crew understood immediately. The horizon, broken and burning, turned itself into a spear one last time. On open channels, humans across Earth heard her final command: "All hands, hold course." The cruiser vanished into the carrier cluster in a bloom of white violence, so bright it turned midnight over the Atlantic into day. The carriers died. The skies cleared. And for one suspended heartbeat, all of Earth looked up. At dawn. At smoke. At the absence where death had been coming. Then the cheers started. Not because the war was over. Because humanity had forced the impossible to bleed. And that changed everything. When the first Allied non-human ships finally entered Sol hours later, they did not arrive to rescue broken primitives. They arrived to join a species that had already proven itself worthy of standing at the center of galactic history. The Council had measured humanity by age, polish, and obedience. The universe measured us differently. By what we do when abandoned. By what we protect when terrified. By whether we rise when every logical voice says kneel. That day, Earth taught the galaxy a lesson no archive could contain. Humans are at their most dangerous when they have something to love, and no one left to rely on but each other. The war for Earth lasted 11 more days. Not 11 glorious days. 11 brutal, sleepless, blood-soaked days where every kilometer of orbit and every surviving city block mattered. But after the Leviathan fell, the shape of the war changed forever. The Vorakai had expected prey, then resistance. What they had not expected was contagion. Humanity's refusal spread. All across the galaxy, old fear cracked. Border fleets joined the fight. Smuggler lanes became supply corridors. Worlds the Council had written off for centuries opened hidden arsenals. Species who had once hidden behind policy now saw the cost of silence in human graves and burning oceans. By the 4th day, Sol was no longer alone. By the 7th, the first Council battle groups arrived, not out of wisdom, but because they were being shamed into relevance by their own citizens. They came polished, disciplined, late, and found a battlefield already changed by human doctrine. Nothing moved in straight lines anymore. Nothing fought by the old rules. Mixed species strike teams adopted human messy combat patterns. Civilian vessels ran deception swarms. Obsolete mining charges became standard anti-phase munitions. Art noise interference was weaponized system-wide after field tests proved it disrupted shade cohesion. Councils that once mocked human improvisation now circulated emergency manuals based on it. Even language changed. Across Allied channels, one phrase kept appearing whenever a situation looked hopeless. Do it the human way. It meant adapt. It meant endure. It meant punch through the problem and apologize to physics later. On the 11th day, the last Vorakai command mass and Sol broke apart under combined assault near Mars. Leaderless remnants scattered outward, hunted by fleets that no longer feared them as myths. The battle was won. Victory felt quiet. Too quiet. Earth had survived, but survival is never the same as escape. Cities were gone. Oceans burned in patches where cleanup drones still fought chemical hellfires. Orbital rings hung broken against the sky like torn halos. Millions were dead. Millions more carried wounds no medicine could fully heal. And still, people came outside, in every surviving place they could. Rooftops, shelters, cratered streets, rural fields spared by chance, lunar bunkers with cracked viewports facing Earth. Martian domes where exhausted colonists stood in silence. They came out to see the sunrise, because it was still ours. President Amara Vale finally emerged from the Geneva bunker 2 days after the ceasefire. No dramatic motorcade, no stage flags, just one tired woman walking through a city that looked half buried in memory. People gathered as she passed. Some saluted, some cried, some simply stood there, too drained for either. At the old Memorial Square, where relief workers had stacked the names of the dead faster than stone could be carved, Vale gave the address later, known as the silent speech. She did not speak of triumph first. She spoke of betrayal. They watched, she said. They knew, and they watched. No one interrupted. But they also learned, because while they watched us bleed, they saw something they had forgotten. The point of power is not survival alone. The point of civilization is what you refuse to abandon. Then she looked up at the scarred sky. We were not saved. Remember that. We were not saved. We were tested by fire, lied to by empires, and left to stand alone. And we stood. That speech echoed through the stars. Not because it was poetic, because it was true. Weeks later, the emergency summit convened not in the old council citadel, but above Earth in a temporary assembly station built from human modular yards and Allied donations. Delegates arrived to negotiate the future. Reparations, defense pacts, war tribunals, shared research against the coming eternum drift. This time, humanity did not sit in the lesser ring. This time, nobody suggested it. Counselor Tarov came personally. Older somehow, smaller too. He stood before the human delegation and bowed deeper than protocol required. We failed you, he said. President Vale answered with the line historians still debate. Yes, you did. Now help us make sure you never fail this way again. That became the foundation of the new alliance. Not forgiveness, responsibility. As for Captain Elena Voss, the galaxy did not forget her. No body was recovered from the wreck of the Horizon. For months, her fate remained unknown. Then, during salvage operations in the debris field beyond lunar orbit, workers found a fragment of bridge plating fused around the ship's emergency log core. Inside was her final unsent personal message. Just 22 words. If Earth lives, let them know we were never helpless. Only early. Tell them to build faster. The dark is still coming. Those words became humanity's new oath. Not a celebration. A mission. Because the worst truth remained ahead of us. The eternum drift was real. Still out there. Still moving. The Vorakai had been only the storm before the storm. And yet the galaxy was different now. Because Earth was different now. No longer the young species begging entry into a fearful order. No longer the emotional upstart others quietly judge from safe halls. Humanity had been tempered in open betrayal and planetary war. We had discovered what lived at our core. Not innocence, not perfection, resolve, the kind that builds fleets from rubble, the kind that turns grief into engines, the kind that looks at an ancient darkness older than empires and starts designing weapons before the fear has even settled. Years later, alien children would learn about the Battle of Seoul in school, not as a tragedy alone, but as the day the galaxy remembered courage was contagious. They would hear how Earth stood when left behind, how humans laughed in bunkers, sang in trenches, and rammed world killers with broken ships rather than let the sky fall quietly. And every version of that story ended the same way, with the line the Council once used to dismiss us becoming the warning whispered to every threat that rose against our worlds. Humans are too emotional, too unstable, too dangerous to trust. And after Earth, the galaxy finally understood why.